To the Nury Edge podcast, where we explore how to maximize productivity while taking care of your nervous system. Here, we help you regulate, focus, and build resilience in today's fast paced workplaces. I'm Lacey Mathews, today's host, joined by Mariana Merritt. And in each episode, we dive into what really drives performance, leadership, and emotional intelligence, sharing real stories and practical tools you can use right away. Today, we are so excited to introduce our guest, Alicia Mandel. Alicia has nearly 2 decades working inside of companies of all size, from Fortune 50 organizations to startups across all industries. In the past 10 years, Alicia has focused on executive development and executive coaching as founder and principal at Medius Advisory Group. And if that wasn't enough, she's also currently acting as head of people at Voxel, an AI and safety startup. So, whether you're leading a team, collaborating with one, or just trying to stay centered in the chaos, take a breath, settle in, and let's get into it. Alicia, I'd love to kick us off with hearing just a bit about what led you into the work that you do.
So it's a kind of silly story that I tumbled into the space of learning and development by mistake. I was a New Yorker, born and raised. I went to college in upstate New York, and then after college, came down into the city and decided that what was most important for me was working in a very famous building, so that when I was watching a movie, I could point to it and say, I work in that building. So I got a job at
Love it.
Citibank in the Citicorp Center, which is the building with the triangle roof. Which to this day, so many years later, I still say, oh, I used to work in that building whenever I see it on the
Of
skyline.
course.
I got a job as the recruiting assistant there. And that was a long time ago, in 1987. So really long time ago, I was the recruiting assistant. There was no computers on anybody's desks. There was mainframes. The printer was on the 42nd floor and I was on the 29th floor, just to tell you how weird that was. But anyway, I get a job as the recruiting assistant. And on my first day of work, the recruiting assistant apparently, the learning and development assistant, which was called training at the time, decided she wanted to be the recruiting assistant. So on my first day, I went in and they said, oh, you're not going to be the recruiting assistant. You're going to be the learning and the training assistant. And I was
No
like,
way.
okay, what does that actually mean? So they were like, and by the way, the training director and the training manager are away at a training program. So you're going to just sit, here's your desk. You could sit here and teach yourself how to use this Mac. And literally that's what I did. I learned at the time that training was really helping people after college, and they recruited, Citibank recruited from the best business schools. So London School of Business and NCA and Harvard Business School, having those new people come into the bank and then had to teach them all over again. Because, as we now know, what you learn in college is very nice and very theoretical. And then when you get to work, it is something entirely different. So needless to say, I really loved doing that work when I figured out what it was. Because what it really was translating content to make things simpler for people to understand. Because even people that go to school at London School of Business don't really get trust and estate planning or investment banking. And so neither did I, but I learned it because I spoke at length with subject matter experts, and I was able to really translate what they were saying to these folks to make it more usable. 4 months later, the recruiting assistant said, that's not what I did when I was the training assistant. I want that job back. And I was like, yeah, no. And so my whole career then was spent in learning and development.
Gosh, what a story. Wow.
Yeah. All because I wanted to work in a famous building.
I love it.
And you did.
And I
you
got some
did.
great experience working in New York at Citibank. And then I was there for 7 years. And after that, I was at American Express for 10, which is, I think, where also in learning and development, and really where I really got a great start on my career between those two places.
Love that. I love listening to you talk. And when you talk about taking information, I mean, there's so much valuable information out there, but taking information and making it accessible to people to use in impactful, meaningful ways in their day to day. I think that your passion and what drives you really shines when you talk about that. So I know in our intro, Lacey mentioned a little bit about the coaching that you do. Will you kind of transition us and talk a little bit about coaching work that you've done with individuals and with groups?
Yeah. So coaching also is something that I fell into. I think it's because I'm just good at doing what you said. I think that that sort of is my superpower, is to see things and then be able to communicate them to people in a way that they can hear it and understand it and hopefully not get defensive. So I talk about what I do is just hold up a mirror. Um, and because I got my start in New York and I have New York roots, and you could take the girl out of New York, but never the New York out of the girl. Um, the directness by which I can coach has been really helpful to me. Not everybody likes it. So when somebody does want me to coach them, I always suggest that they meet 2 or 3 other people, because I think the rapport and the trust building is really, really important. Um, so, uh, you know, I feel like that my ability to do what you said, that is actually my passion, Mariana, and I appreciate you picking that up. Um, and then being able to do it in a clear way that is direct. But, like, I've been also known to be sugar free, as my friend Jerry calls me.
Oh, I love that. I may have to adopt that for myself. I'm
That's
sure I
fantastic.
have been experienced as sugar free, but defined as something else in the past.
Right. It could definitely be defined as something else. I choose to look at it as a positive.
Love that. I love that. Oh, man. I think effective executive coaches have to establish exactly what you said, that rapport and the trust. And I think those are the most meaningful experiences when you're working with someone who actually can help you move the needle. Um, will you talk to us a little bit about, like, what are the barriers that you kind of see typically on people desire to grow and improve, but there's maybe some buckets of barriers that get in the way to growth and improvement?
Yeah, I think that I've had some clients where they'll say things like, okay, what I really want to work on is I need to do a better job of prioritizing. Um, and then we talk a little bit about prioritization. Um, and then they say, okay, done with that. I want to move on to the next thing. And so that's when I know the barrier to success is they haven't really got to what the real problem is. Because these issues that I spend time coaching, and I spend time coaching with mostly very senior leaders, that really haven't had, I always say CEO is a very lonely job, because there's not a lot of people that will, number one, tell you the truth. And you could believe that they are telling you the truth. And that goes into like one group of people that think they're getting the truth. Where in that role, my job is to say, by the way, you're probably hearing what you want to hear. There's this thing called managing up, right? Um, so sometimes it's lonely because they're not hearing the truth. It's also lonely because they don't always get an opportunity to vent or to work through with some people, um, who their real trust circle is. So I think the barriers are sometimes that people don't have a level of self-awareness. Um, and so what other people, I always start with the 360 feedback or some interviews with people or an assessment or two, because it's not just I don't know the people. So that's a barrier. Once I start getting to know them, it's much more helpful. But like being able to hold up a mirror to say, here's what everyone else is saying. What do you think? Um, and, and they either say, yes, that's a problem. And I've heard that feedback many times before and I really need help with it. Or they say, no, that's not a problem. And the way we talk about this in terms of emotional intelligence is it's either self-awareness is the issue or self-management or self-regulation is the issue. Those are really I think that encompasses 75% of the work that I do with executives.
Yes. Self-awareness and self-regulation, as you heard from the intro, from our previous conversations, these are the things that we also target because we agree with you. I mean, if humans can be empowered to one, get insight into our blind spots, and we all have them, not because we're raging monsters usually, but because we see our good intentions. We see the best self that we hope we're projecting to the world. And so getting access, whether it's that 360 review, I think the struggle there is that, can people be honest during that? Are there fears of repercussions, whether implied or real, that the feedback will be used against them? There are these really unique human elements that make that task really challenging. So kudos to you for doing it, because the value of getting honest, accurate insight into those blind spots can be what's really transformative for people. So I love the self-awareness, and then of course the self-regulation. How many of us have been hijacked by our nervous system when you're trying to be your best, but you're just really irritable that day? We are human before we're anything else. And so at Nury, we think a lot about where does AI come into play with that? So huge respect for executive coaches. I also used to do some executive coaching, and a lot of those same themes we roll into Nury Edge. One of the things that you kind of said quietly is the truth that most businesses only can offer executive coaching at the C-suite level. And so we really want to bring the benefit of safe coaching to every level at every tier, because the humanity and the needs of it exist well within other realms, not just C-suite. Um, have you done any work with like whole organizations? Will you talk a little bit about culture and what teams you're seeing do some work on building healthy climates together?
Um, yes. First of all, I have huge respect for what you guys are doing, and also have made a few introductions so far, because I think that, coaching at scale is something that we really need to think about. Me coaching an individual leader is really just not scalable in an organization. And when you go down several layers, then I'm going to just be honest. What happens is also your price tag goes down several layers, because organizations can't possibly spend the same amount of money on the 10 or so executives at the executive level that they would on the, middle management level. But I will say that I think middle managers are the ones that need the most coaching. It's the hardest job. I think it's the hardest job in the organization. You're getting pulled from both ways, and you never know what's right.
Mm.
So when I talk with executives, I spend a lot of time talking about this concept of first team. Your first team is your boss's team, really. When you're an executive, the first team is the executive team. More important even than your direct report team. When you're a middle manager, it's really hard to know who your first team is. So there is a lot of, I think, coaching required in that. So I don't really do a lot of that kind of coaching, but what I do is I do still do, because my first love is training. So I do a lot of management training, still to this day. I usually have one or two clients all the time working in the middle of a management training session. And I like to say that it's not a one and done. You don't come in, teach something, and then, you know, they don't use it and then they forget it. So this is where I think the real AI can help. In so many ways, even at the executive level too, is in the reinforcement of stuff that we talked about, is in catching people doing things right, is another thing that I talk about all the time as leaders. Can we catch our team doing something right? Because they're much more likely to replicate it. than when you catch them doing something wrong. Except we're so used to catching people doing things wrong.
I think that it's been mostly about capacity, right?
I think it's
When you talk
100% about capacity.
Yeah,
Yes.
when you talk about the human limitations of a coach that's excellent, that gets people to transform their practice, not being totally scalable, you can't coach everyone at every organization. We think about the impact of, you can't catch everyone who's doing everything right. So then you just risk mitigate. But the cost of risk mitigation to company culture is that then it becomes this unspoken punitive, watch out, don't get caught, don't get in
Yes.
trouble. So I love the moment that we're in with AI and culture right now, that we can empower organizations and great managers to say, hey, I can't constantly be monitoring, but I can use AI to acknowledge at a higher rate, to praise at a higher rate, to give credit where it's due. There are people working really, really hard. And so having that access to visibility, I think, changes things. I think one of the other important things that you brought up is just the access to coaching. So if I'm working one-on-one with someone, I'm seeing them once a week. Whereas with Nury Edge, if I'm an employee, I can log in and have a 90-second self-regulation practice as many times throughout my day as I need to. That 90 seconds will save me countless of hours of water cooler conversation that may not actually be regulating my nervous system, that might dysregulate yours also.
Exactly.
So that spread. I also think that people, even with excellent rapport, it's really hard to work through all of the places that still need to grow when you're in that one-on-one human relationship. And so what we see with Nury Edge is that people have this adoption cycle where they're a little nervous about AI. How is this going to work? Am I going to get coaching from a robot? And then they really lean in and have this wonderful experience of having a safe space where they can tell their whole truth, whatever it may be. I'm super irritable today. I went off on someone. It wasn't their fault. Whereas if I'm justifying to a person in front of me, I might say, well, it's because she was blank, blank, blank. So having the space with AI right now, I think, allows people to maybe drop some of the self-defense a little bit more than we see in the human relationships.
I wanted to ask you, Alicia, you mentioned earlier, and we talked about it earlier today, and I think in previous conversations as well. But what you highlight is that self-awareness and self-regulation. And I think you said this in a past conversation of, we walk into a room and we expect like self-regulation from others. We expect self-awareness, but we don't teach them. And then we go into a room and we look for someone else to regulate us. And so what happens when you're the adult in the room, when you're that leader, and you're like, I need to steer the ship, but also I have bad days. And then everyone's leaning into that. I'd love to hear a little bit of just your experience in how you've helped leaders or just anyone that you've coached really understand that self-regulation side as well. Like, how do you go from being like, okay, I'm aware that I'm freaking out, to I can actually re-regulate myself? That's something we really emphasize in Nury, but I love hearing it comes from the human experience so deeply.
Yeah. So it's happened so many times. It happens to me. It happens to me all the time. Where I could feel myself, getting dysregulated, frustrated, angry, like, are you kidding me? And so as a coach, it's so much easier to see. It's so much easier to know when I do 360 interviews and I hear people say like, oh, they jump down my throat or whatever. Most of the time they're good, but you never know what you're going to get. Like that's the hardest self-regulation one. You never know what you're going to get. Cause then I work with them to say, do you actually know what they're going to get? Like, can you feel when you're going into a meeting that you're irritable? Can you allow yourself time to get composure is what I usually talk about. Composure, I think, is a really important word. Can you excuse yourself for a minute? Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think I might have told you this story at when I was working at American Express. So it was a long, long time ago, and I had a boss who was my boss's boss, maybe even my boss's boss's boss, who I didn't really like very much. And we were sitting in a meeting together with a bunch of other people, and I said something really just purposely to get under her skin. I was just an idiot, a snot
Never.
nosed kid, right? Like, and she looked at me and said, I'm going to excuse myself for a minute and I'll be right back. I need to gain my composure before I respond to that. And she left the room, and all the people sitting around the circle, including myself, were like, oh, you're in trouble. Uh-oh. And I was sweating. Right. And she came back in the room and she said, Alicia, if you wouldn't mind after this meeting, just sticking around for a little bit, we'll have a conversation sidebar on that. We don't need to go through that now. Let's get back to the meeting. And as much as I didn't like her, we just had a whole different set of values. I have never forgotten that.
Yeah.
And I use that as an example with so many of my clients to say, just, when you lose control or composure, you are giving away your power. And if you want your power back, you own it, just take it. But, the one that looks like an idiot is the one that loses their marbles, right? The person that gets hysterical is the one that everybody points the finger at. So the more calm that you can remain, the more in control you are, and the better you'll show up 100% of the time.
Absolutely.
It's really hard, and it takes practice, but also, this when you think about the brain science, it takes a minute. Like, it takes time for all the chemicals to get out of your prefrontal cortex so that you're not like in amygdala hijack, right? That
That's
you
right.
are actually calm enough to say, okay, this is silly. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. But I appreciate that what you're naming is that the goal or the measure of success, the marker of growth isn't that you stop having those experiences. You don't stop being human. You don't stop feeling mad, sad, irritated, tired.
yep.
But you build the resilience to be able to manage it in healthy, appropriate, professional ways that you can be proud of later. So I think that this is such a good nod to our humanity, right? We don't stop being humans just because we're better informed, but we do manage it better. We do decide who's in control. And it shouldn't be, it should rarely be our amygdala. Our amygdala is so helpful when there's real danger present. But yeah, at a boardroom across the table, probably not real danger present. You can probably regain your control and composure. But I love the acknowledgement that we are all human, and so how do we accumulate skills, tools, spaces that allow us to function at our best? I'm looking at our time and I can't believe it. I say this almost every episode. How did we get to 23 minutes? This was by intention. We try to keep them very short, but the conversation has been so rich. Thank you for your transparency. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for being sugar-free. That I will be taking with me for sure. And just so appreciate your time here today.
Well, thanks for the invitation. It was really great to work with both of you on this, so I really appreciate it.
We hope to have you back, Alicia. Thank you so, so much. We hope everyone has enjoyed today's episode of the Nury Edge. We would love to connect with you further. Please reach out to us at nuryedge.ai if you're curious to learn more. If you'd like to connect with Alicia, you can also reach out to her at alicia@mediusadvisorygroup.com or on LinkedIn at Alicia Mandel. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.